Hello, this is Madeline Doherty from IntraSystems. Thank you for joining our webinar today, Citrix Cloud Readiness Webinar. First, a couple of housekeeping items to cover before we start our webinar. If you have any questions, please enter them in the Q&A box. We will answer all questions at the end of the webinar. I have muted all attendees so there is no background noise during the presentation. Okay, so the agenda for today's webinar is what defines the cloud, key reasons to adopt the Citrix Cloud, Citrix Cloud Services portfolio, today's IT issues to consider, IntraSystems Citrix Cloud Readiness Assessment, and ways to communicate with your peers. I'd now like to present today's presenters. Todd Smith, who is the Senior Sales Engineering Manager at Citrix Systems, as well as Al Collins, who is IntraSystems Director of Technical Services. Todd, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great, thanks, Madeline. So I want to start off today by talking about cloud computing in general. And one of the statistics that's out there is about in 2018, there's going to be over 3.6 billion internet users that are going to be connecting to some type of cloud computing service. And if we look at what defines the cloud and how will I benefit from the cloud, so most people are going to the cloud because it's perceived as being simpler, and the perception is that we need to have some way to provide a simpler way for our users to connect to the environment and the services. It is certainly faster as we start looking at the speed at which the cloud data centers, where they are relative to where the users are coming in from. Faster, it's definitely going to be faster, and it's more flexible. So it's not just delivering one service, it's delivering a consolidated view of services through a common interface, and it's also going to be more secure in a variety of different ways. And we'll get into some of those as we go along today. So the first question that we have before we go into this is around, are you a consumer of cloud services today?
So I'm going to launch a poll. So if you could all just vote on this, this would be great. And the poll question that we're asking is if you're currently engaged in a cloud initiative. I'm going to launch it now. Okay. Alrighty. So not everyone cast their vote, but it looks like the majority are currently engaged in a cloud initiative, which is great.
So one of the things that, this is not uncommon. Most people have some type of cloud initiative going on within your organization. Most of us are also consumers of cloud delivered resources. And the first and foremost one tends to be things like email or access out to task-specific applications such as Salesforce or Workday or some type of SAP solution. They're delivered to a multitude of different devices. So some of them may be devices that are handhelds, mobile devices. Some of them are traditional desktops and laptops and things like that. And they're also coming in from multiple locations, right? So oftentimes the application vendor will select which cloud provider they want to deliver their services through. And one of the things that Citrix has done to alleviate that is to normalize that delivery. So we have what's called Citrix Cloud Services or Citrix Workspace Services. And taking that model of being simple, fast, secure, and adaptable or flexible as the baseline, and then adding services above that. So whether it be a application or a desktop service, a content collaboration service, a mobility service, or a access, a NetScaler gateway service on top of there, delivering that all as a single way of getting in to the environment, right? So being able to have single sign-on supported, having the ability to support multi-factor authentication for the user. So the user signs into the portal or to the receiver, or now what's called the Workspace app, sign into there, and then have all of the services delivered through these Citrix Cloud services. So the simple way to define this is what we refer to as the secure digital workspace. And what that is, it's a combination of your applications, your desktops, and your services all delivered securely to the user and satisfying the needs of the individual users as well as the needs of the IT administrators and the IT folks. Users want to have a better experience. They want to have the flexibility to run it on any device without having to worry about giving up any security and being at risk. Whereas the IT administrators need to care about things like where's the best place for me to put this workload? Is it on Azure or in AWS or in my on-prem data center? How does all that mesh together? And more importantly, how do I get real-time analytics in that single management pane of glass to be able to do that? So if we can click to the next. So the big question comes up around, how do we get there? What is the cloud assessment, right? So you got to look at why you're moving to the cloud. So the first one is most organizations are coming back with some type of a cloud-first strategy or a cloud-first initiative. Oftentimes, this is coming out of a financial organization or the executive level of folks that are looking to say, hey, you know what, we need to get into this cloud because I read some things along the way, or our competitors are using the cloud. We need to find a way to either cut costs, increase revenue, give the users a better experience. So there's a cloud-first strategy. The second thing is around, hey, it's a cost-cutting measure. It's an ability to maintain our IT costs. Maybe it's moving from a capital expenditure to an operational expense. The cloud is very astute at being able to do that. The third thing is around, I don't want to have to do an upgrade ever again. The upgrade to my operating systems, the upgrades to the applications or to the licensing layers and things like that, not have to worry about that. The other ones around cloud services, especially from Citrix, is around being able to leverage what's referred to as a hybrid cloud. And a hybrid cloud may be, you've got multiple public cloud vendors, Amazon, AWS, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud Platform. It could be a private cloud hosting facility. It could also be that you want to include your existing data center as part of your resources and deliver them all through a single contextual layer to be able to manage those costs better now and in the future, and also leverage your existing investments that you've made into your hardware. And the final one is around, everyone wants to be able to onboard and get the employees working faster and working more efficiently in a timely manner. So if I don't have to worry about waiting for hardware to show up or waiting to purchase additional resources, I can actually increase that time to value and the velocity of that. So a couple of things to consider during your cloud transition. One of them is, what are some of the cloud providers that are out there? What are some of the use cases that you're trying to solve? Is it a remote access use case? Is it a situation where you want to be able to onboard the employees faster, have them be more productive earlier? Some of the other things are around, what are some of the legal considerations that you need to have when you're moving data and intellectual property up to the cloud? The other aspect is around, what are the financial considerations that need to be considered, right? Is it going to be cost effective to move to the cloud early? Are there situations where you need to worry about the capital expenses that are still on your books that you need to still continue to depreciate, right? So what are the financial impacts of that? And then the final one is, what are the changes to your business operations? So the business operations aspect of it is a real simple example. for years, we've been telling our users to leave their machines up and running over the course of the weekend because it's easier to leave the machine running and goes into sleep mode and things like that than it is to shut down and log off and do all of those activities. But in the cloud environment, basically the meter starts running when you connect to it and the meter stops running when you disconnect from it. So it's a change in some of the business operational aspects of it. So from a cloud perspective, you want to consider those things. From a technical perspective, this is where you want to start looking at things like what sizes do I need to worry about? You know, what size of virtual machines? What's my cloud going to look like? What applications are going to be moved up to the cloud? In some cases, you've got some legacy applications that may not be intended to use on a hypervisor, or they may have issues around where they are relative to the data in the data storage. There's the services aspect of it. So what are some of the services that it's going to rely on, right? So is it single factor authentication? Is it multi-factor authentication? Do you need to have some type of a hardware enabled endpoint device that's going to leverage and provide some type of service for you? The other aspect around the technical aspects is around availability. What makes sense from the availability mode, right? So how often do I need to connect to this? How often, what's my uptime expectations? And finally, looking at the consumption model, right? Is this going to be primarily user-based consumption that are going to be shift workers, or are they going to be knowledge workers that are expected to extend their day out and be always connected or always on? There are different models of consumption there that need to be considered as well. So let's take a look at what are some of the things that are in the cloud services aspect of it. So if we look at our cloud services, so we want to start off on the left-hand side with talking about the workspace service itself. And this is really the underpinning of the support of our entire cloud offering, right? So our workspace service includes XenApp and XenDesktop. So these are the names of our on-prem solution that has been moved up to the cloud. XenApp, XenDesktop service, XenMobile service, a ShareFile service that's available, as well as our NetScaler gateway. So those are included in this workspace service. The benefit of breaking it down, and this is you can buy them or consume them as a suite of products or a bundle, or you can do them individually. The benefits of doing applications and desktops is getting all of your users on a single version of the application or a single version of a desktop operating system. There's benefits associated with that, and those are things that we've been doing at Citrix for almost 30 years now. Being able to deliver also a secure browser. So the secure browser service really allows you to have a lockdown browser that can have your whitelist and blacklist of sites that you can go to. It can specify individual versions of a browser or types of browser based on the websites that they're going to. So if a website is optimized to run on Microsoft Edge, you can give them a secure browser to that Microsoft Edge enabled website. The other one is around some basics around the Essentials services, which are XenApp and XenDesktop, and those are available directly from the Microsoft Marketplace. And it's really a scaled down version of traditional XenApp, XenDesktop environment. If we look at the mobility aspect of it, we have our XenMobile products, or our what's now referred to as our user environment management environment. That allows us to do both device management as well as application management. So there's some benefits there, and that is also delivered as a service. So no more having to put a XenMobile environment on-prem if you don't want to do it that way. The other thing is our ShareFile service has been moved to the cloud. This is an interesting one because it's already, ShareFile grew up in the cloud, so this was almost a no-brainer for us. We've also, in the networking space, we've added our NetScaler Gateway to be run in the cloud, as well as our gateway service, or a web app security service. So once again, going back to those SaaS-enabled applications that you want to enable single sign-on, you want to be able to extend your existing environment up into the cloud through just an authentication service. The two biggest ones that we've added has been around the world of analytics. So being able to understand what the user experience is like, but also what the back end experience is like, right? So what matters around user experience? Well, performance is one of them. Another thing around the user experience could be things like performance metrics, as well as security metrics, as well as being able to bring in application operations. And application operations is becoming critical in the face of people paying for licenses that they may not use, or understanding what the user experience is like, both from a number of users, as well as scaling and sizing activities, and real valid information about how that works. We've added this on top of our NetScaler management and analytics service has been bundled into this analytics, the Citrix analytics services, to allow us to have better understanding of how big of an impact the network has on that user experience, as well as the system performance. And finally, we've also added some services around our service providers for things like license usage and insight management, as well as being able to offer our SD-WAN, or software-defined wide area networking options, as a service as well. So let's dig into the workspace services a little bit here, and we talk about what it includes and what are some of the advantages, right? So the workspace service includes the XenApp and XenDesktop, as we talked about earlier. All of the cases that are out there, the unique advantages of running it as a service versus running it on-prem, right? It is faster. Users are more productive sooner. It's also simpler to manage and simpler to use, both from a user experience perspective as well as the administrative experience perspective. The other thing is, because it is a service, we're constantly implementing our best practices into it, right? So as we go, it's an evergreen environment. So what that means is it's being updated on a regular basis to deal with both security as well as performance issues. And once again, it is more secure because it's giving you better insights into what the devices are that are connecting, as well as what the users are doing within the sessions and within the applications and within the desktop. So there's benefits there as well. If we dig into the XenApp and XenDesktop service, or desktop and application service, this is part of the workspace service. The benefits there is that it takes your traditional XenApp and desktop environment of delivering an application or a desktop, a published desktop or a published application, up into the cloud. The management layer goes in the cloud. The workloads can stay on-prem, or they can be any other location. It's very adaptable when it comes to being able to have things like disaster recovery scenarios, right? So instead of having to worry about building out dedicated disaster recovery environments, you can actually now include the cloud as part of your disaster recovery plan, especially for things like applications, data, and desktops. The next one is around our XenApp service, very similar to what we were talking about with the XenDesktop service. This is more specific around applications, and this is also where we start talking about things like our secure browser service, as well as the ability to provide better user experience around performance and around faster authentication. It is, once again, it's much more simpler from the user perspective. So our Zen Mobile service, which is part of our Citrix Cloud Services offerings, traditionally Zen Mobile was for device management and application management, and the ability to take those applications onto a specific device containerize it so the application and the data are connected on that device, and then when you have to either wipe the device or remove the application, the data comes with it without having to do a complete wipe of the device. It also allows you to manage your fleet of devices, whether it's a Windows 10 devices, Chromebooks, the BlackBerry devices that are out, or sorry, no, not sorry, the Raspberry Pi devices that are out there as well. That's our universal environment management capability. ShareFile is our document management, content and collaboration services. This is like I said earlier, this is an environment where this is a service that has always been delivered to the cloud. We still support the on-prem or the hybrid availability of where you want to store your data. We've added in some key features within ShareFile in general to include things like the ability to edit, the ability to integrate with document management systems or DLP environments. Being able to also expand that relationship out there. So NetScaler Gateway, this is another service that we've moved up into the cloud as an offering. So Gateway allows you to have single sign-on running as a service. So instead of having NetScalers always have to be on-prem and connecting in, they can be run in the cloud. Once again, it's much more adaptable. It can be built around a high availability scenario, and it's also it's the only service to provide ICA proxy and single sign-on to Citrix VDI, web, and SaaS applications. So we are the only one in the marketplace that can do that with our environment natively. So the management and analytics services, this is critical when you start saying, okay, hey, I'm using a cloud provider. I've signed into this level of service or signed an SLA. I've got expectations. This is the kind of can be referred to as the show me application, right? It's the ability to go in and say, hey, am I getting the benefits? Am I getting the speed and performance that I'm expecting and paying for? And also be able to serve as a tripwire for information that's coming in early or coming in from our users. So instead of having to rely on the user to call the help desk, it's the ability to gather the information ahead of time, solve the problem before it hits the help desk and becomes a user issue. The web app security service, this is critical because it allows us to package all of the capacity to deliver secure web apps directly from the NetScaler Gateway service. So your front end to your outbound applications. So if I'm using something like Salesforce and I want to deliver it to a specific group of users, I put it up as part of a web app security service. I put the policy in front of it, and it allows me to then dictate who can connect to it, and I also can control how frequently their username and passwords go, how often they're I can manage it through single sign-on, and I can also get application metrics back on how frequently it's being connected to and used. Probably the biggest game changer that we've implemented is around Citrix Analytics. Citrix Analytics gives us that full end-to-end visibility into things like what is the user parameters look like. So if you're familiar with Citrix, from years ago, we used to have EdgeSite, we had Insight Management, we had Insight Services. The benefit here is being able to look all the way down to where the user is connecting from and see what their performance looks like, and also identify where are those challenges in each of those connections. As well as being able to do predictive analytics around things like user behavior. One of the things we're going to be introducing later on this year is the ability to look into what the users are doing, not from a looking over their shoulder or screen session recording or session monitoring, but actually look at what the users are doing as far as disk reads and writes. So are they dumping a lot of information down onto a USB drive, which may be an indicator of a potential issue. Or is the user account that normally logs in from the Boston area, is the user now trying to log in from China or Russia or some other overseas location? And then have the intelligence to pass along what needs to be done, right? So maybe if someone's trying to log in from an overseas location, you disable their account for a period of time until they call the help desk. Or if they know that that's normal behavior because the person is traveling for business, allow them to connect in. It's no longer a threat. We want to be able to have, and this is where our analytics piece kind of ties in with a lot of the machine learning capabilities or artificial intelligence learning, to understand what that behavior is and assign a risk value to it, to be able to then make determinations and make decisions without having a lot of human interaction to do those decisions. And finally, the other capabilities around our smart tools. So one of the smart tools capabilities that we love to talk about is around smart tools and smart scaling. And that's the ability to say, hey, you know what, we noticed that there's been an increase in the number of users that are hitting this specific application. It's time to spin up some additional services or some additional resources to deal with that increased utilization or increased user load. So this really allows us for customers especially, to be able to expand and contract their environment based on their business cycles. So as an example, as we're coming up into benefits administration or benefits enrollment timeframe for a lot of our customers, they know that they're going to have more people hitting their HR systems to enroll in benefits. Well, that's not a year-round occurrence. We need to be able to shift services and resources around as needed. SmartScale is one of those capabilities that allows us to do that. The same thing is along those migration tools.
Now, before we go on to the next section here, we do have a couple of poll questions.
Sure.
Todd, should we ask a couple?
Sure.
Okay, so let's see now. All right, so I now want to go to poll number 2. Okay, I'm going to launch this next poll. And here we're asking, who is your cloud provider? And you can check all that applies to your organization. Okay. I'll give it just another 30 seconds. Okay, so this is, what do you think, Todd?
It's pretty typical. So we've got a lot of organizations that have made investments in on-prem, and some of the challenges associated with moving to the cloud has always been around security and protection of data and the intellectual property of the organization. So do we want to, the hybrid approach has always been something that we've intentionally left intact and also continue to expand on. Understanding that a lot of organizations have made some considerable investments in hardware, building out a data center, building out new storage arrays, adding in compute capacity, all on-prem. And then you're looking to kind of dip your toes into the cloud as a way to migrate, and migrating either specific business functions or specific applications into a cloud-enabled service. So one of the things that we want to talk about is, if we can go to the next slide here.
Yeah.
So we want to look at what are some of the issues that are shaping your journey to the cloud. And one of those, should be able to build out.
Yep.
There we go.
Okay.
First one is around security, right? So security has become an issue around the cloud for things, and it's not just around how do I ensure that my data is protected. You also want to make sure that the user profile information is protected as well, especially when we start talking about things like single sign-on and intellectual property being stored in the cloud. If I'm a healthcare organization, do I want to start putting patient data up there, or do I Do I start with all of the forms and online registration systems and things like that? Is that something that I want to do? The other thing is around the infrastructure. At what point do I start saying, hey, you know what, I don't need to build out a data center anymore? Or do I want to keep expanding out the infrastructure to my infrastructure dollars go over towards more networking solutions, right? So now all of a sudden the network becomes important. The other aspect is around storage, right? I've invested a considerable amount of money in my storage environment, my storage systems, and do I just pick it all up and throw it into the cloud, or do I migrate things? You know, when I'm talking with customers, I talk a lot about, you know, when you move to a new house, do you have a garage sale and do you throw things out before you move, or do you move it after? Do you move it all and bring it with you and throw it out when you get to your new house? It gives us the opportunity to consider what's important data for us to store and what's that non-important data, or what can be archived. The network aspect of it becomes critical, right? Do I have enough network bandwidth and network capabilities to allow my users to really become remote users from my existing data center? Do I have enough inbound internet access to allow remote employees to come in and work from home or do this flexible working environment? Do I also have the right protections and security around that? The other consideration out there is what's referred to as the DevOps space, and that is everything to do with managing things like websites and managing your application environment, where the developers have to have access to production as well as their test environments, and make sure that all of the security is in place and you have the right policies and procedures to allow the rapid application development process to happen. And the last thing is around mobile devices and mobility in general. We're starting to see most organizations allowing their employees to come in with some type of mobile device to either get company mail, they get access to applications, they get access to some data or some type of services. How do we protect not only the company, but also the employees, and in some cases, the customers that those employees are having interactions with, especially around these mobile devices? Do we want to start being able to protect things like text messaging and instant messaging and a lot of the applications that are out there? So one of the things that we talk about with security is the risks of the damages associated with security, right? So 2021 is going to be around $6 trillion, according to some of the studies that are out there. And some of the things that are causing this concern is around things like malware, crypto locking, data theft, and identity theft. So we're seeing an increase in customers that are coming back and saying, hey, we're concerned with the identity theft not only coming from external actors, you know, the threat actors, but they're also coming from internal, and they may also be coming in from a third party who we do business with. So those are some concerns that keep going up. Can you go back to one?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Sorry. So we're also seeing an increase in the audit programs that are out there. Almost every single organization now has to comply with one or multiple audit programs. In some cases, they have overlapping audit points, but they also have, you know, they tend to be very expensive. There has to be proof of positive control, which means it's no longer good enough to say, hey, you know what, we do a disaster recovery test once a year and we send our backup tapes off-site. Those are rudimentary audit programs. Now all of a sudden they want to see how many users had a rights change associated with that user account over the period of the year, who authorized it, who approved it, and who verified and validated it at the end. Those are positive proof of positive controls. The other one is around what happens when we have an incident. Well, there's two things that we need to do. One of them is we need to plan for some type of incident and prepare for it. It does consume budget, but it's also a way to find budget associated with increasing security can help reduce our risk of an incident happening. And then the other aspect of it is understanding from a security incident perspective, it's not always the incident itself, it's how you respond and recover to it.
Okay.
Yeah. From an infrastructure perspective, you know, we're seeing a lot of organizations come back and say, hey, I don't want to own stuff anymore. I don't want to own physical devices or physical servers and storage anymore. Which means that the costs are shifting, right? So they're going from a traditional on-prem data center to now a supported or a service model. The other thing with that, and we'll talk quickly about the infrastructure thing, is this could also be a way to find additional budget, especially when you start talking about the real estate cost savings of not having to build out a data center or provide power and cooling into a data center, or to all of the other components that go along with that. We've had customers come back and say they've been able to save between 10 to 15% of their annual real estate budget by reducing the sizes of their data centers because they've moved to the cloud. The network is the computer. I mean, this is something that Larry Ellison said years ago, but it really has come to the fruition of today, where everything goes through the network at some point in time. We also have situations where we've got data everywhere, and data everywhere means that you need to understand where that is and if you're going to consider moving it up to the cloud. The benefit here is that the cost of storage has typically gone down over the course of time, but we haven't seen a reduction in the data replication and data duplication efforts as well. So the cost has gone down, but it doesn't mean we're not consuming the same amount of data out there. DevOps, we talked a little bit about that. Every developer thinks they're unique and they need to have their own environment that they can manage and control. So we need to understand that DevOps is a use case that we need to consider as we're moving to the cloud. The mobility aspect of it, right? Device access, protecting that endpoint device by enrolling it into your environment, being able to have security and policies pushed down to that device. The other thing that's a challenge sometimes is, you know, you have no control or little control over what people bring into the environment. So these consumer-based devices, hey, you know what, I got the latest Samsung Galaxy phone. How do I connect that to my network? And how do I, that's the user's perspective, but your perspective needs to be, how do I lock it up and make sure that new device doesn't bring in additional challenges? And that's part of the enterprise management approach for that. So we do have is this where we have a polling question? Or actually, it's the next one, sorry. No. So as we look forward, what are some of the big challenges, right? So big data and Internet of Things is one of those things that's out there. Big data is around the unstructured data sources that are out there that just consume a lot of space. And we're still figuring out as an industry how to read through that data and gather information out of there. The Internet of Things, I mean, we're seeing everything from enchanted objects that are out there, everything from smart umbrellas that tell you whether or not you need to bring an umbrella based on the weather report that it picks up. Or there's also the enchanted devices such as, you know, the cars that we drive in that have automatic understanding of who's driving it and what the weather conditions are, what the road conditions are, and things like that. So we're constantly changing those things. And really, the next big thing is around machine learning and artificial intelligence, and we're adjusting behavior of not only the environment in the system, but we're also adjusting behavior of the user and the individual, and being able to predict those things. So with that,
well, Todd, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So now we're going to wrap up with our final portion of the webinar, and I'm happy to present Al Collins, who is our Senior Technical Director here at IntraSystems. So Al, I'm going to move it over to you. So now we're going to talk about IntraSystems Readiness Assessment.
Awesome, thanks. Thanks, Todd. So yeah, anytime we're moving to a new platform, this being Citrix Cloud that we're talking about here, one of the key things that you want to consider is an assessment to make sure that you're looking at the environment and making all the correct decisions as you move to the cloud. So some of the things that we cover are all the key decision points in terms of one of the key decision points is the cloud the right fit? It's not always the right fit, right? I mean, a lot of times we'll go into customers, we'll do an assessment, and sometimes the cloud is not right at this particular point in time. So that's one of the key decision points. Other things that we look at are obviously the use cases. Everything starts with the use cases to determine not only what applications are going to get, but where are the applications going to run? So one of the key points of Citrix Cloud is that you have the ability to run not only on-prem, traditional model, but in the cloud at the same time. So you could have some of your applications and users in Azure, for instance, and other users on-prem. So you have that flexibility. Other benefits are when you're building a traditional Citrix environment today, you have to build delivery controllers, you have to build SQL servers, you have to build NetScalers, storefront servers. With the Citrix Cloud, all that is taken away from you. So you essentially just have it as a service.
Okay. Can you speak up a little louder?
Yep.
Yeah.
So some of the things we look at, understand your starting point. So where are you today? Discover cloud leading practices. So we're going to look at best practices, obviously, around Citrix Cloud and public clouds as far as Azure and AWS. We're going to look at your processes. We're going to build a cloud readiness report. So that's going to say, is the cloud right? Not only is it right, is it also the right fit at this particular point in time, and also where the workload is going to actually run. You may have some still on-prem. You may have some in the public cloud as well. Mm-hmm. So first thing you want to do is schedule your assessment. We're going to look at all your requirements. We're going to map those requirements to the Citrix Cloud. We're going to look at your licensing as well, workflow, gap analysis, and then we're going to do findings with the customer. And that usually runs into a design phase. So after we do the assessment, we're typically going to do a formal design to actually go through all those decision points in greater detail. So why IntraSystems? We've been a platinum partner of Citrix since 1996. I'm not going to go through every one of these bullets.
Mm-hmm. But the big one, Al,
Worldwide
is
Partner of the Year.
Worldwide Partner of the Year.
Heard.
Yeah.
Right. So I think we've been a platinum partner longer than anyone.
Yeah.
I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, all right. So,
other ways to communicate with your peers. These are great organizations here, the Citrix User Group community. So it is not only other customers, it's also partners and other vendors as well. So it's a great resource, number one. Number two, if you haven't already registered, we have our annual golf tournament at Blue Hills. It's a great time. Definitely register for that.
Yeah, that's a great opportunity for you to meet all of our key partners, and you know, Citrix is our platinum sponsor, so it's a great place to network and learn the latest and the greatest. Todd, did you want to add a little more about the Citrix User Group community?
Yeah, so it's a really great opportunity to get together with your peers, both in the network, both for networking as well as some great knowledge sharing. Because if you think that you're the first one going through this path, there's probably someone else who's already gone down the path or is going down the path with you, and there's no better way to share the success than to leverage your peers, and CUGC is a great way of doing that. It's both, we have regional chapters, so we've got a Metro Boston chapter, as well as there's a global group as well that puts on webinars and a lot of great forums and information sharing as well. All of our Citrix technology partners are out there, and they are regular participants in the CUGC, both from a presentation perspective, but also providing some really great information in the forums. Highly recommend it.
Okay, great. I'm going to ask one more poll question here, and I would like to know if you're interested in having InterSystems come and provide a Citrix Cloud Readiness Assessment. So I'm going to launch that right now, and if you could vote on that, that would be great. And then we're going to open it up to questions. Okay. I'll give you just another few seconds to do that. All right. Well, that's great. We really feel like that's the way to go, and we're happy to see that you agree with us as well. So we will definitely be in touch with you after this to follow up on that. So now we're going to open it up to questions. So let's see here. Let me see what we have, if there's any questions here. If you'd like to ask a question, now is the opportunity to enter it into the box that you have available. Oh, wait a minute, here's a question. Todd?
Sure. So one of the questions that we typically ask during these sessions is, you know, do you feel that you learned something new or walked away with something beneficial from this? And also, as Madeline said, this is a great opportunity to have InterSystems come in and do some participate in an assessment as well and provide some more details around this.
Okay. Well, you must have done a great job, Todd and Al, because oh, here's one right here. Okay, so I'm going to read these and I'll present it to both of our key guys here. So the first question is, does Citrix Cloud provide endpoint protection? Todd?
So it does to a certain extent. So what I will say is it'll manage the policies around what's happening on the endpoint. So it'll do an endpoint analysis capability. So it will check for things like, has the endpoint device been compromised either by being jailbroken or rooted? Does it have the latest antivirus policies on there?
The second question is, can we host an Exchange server including Microsoft Office Suite?
Absolutely. Not on Citrix Cloud, though.
That would be, so the Exchange server typically would not run on XenApp, but the Outlook client or the Office suite would be delivered through XenApp, the XenApp service.
All right, and then another question here is, does the Citrix Cloud have a failover for disaster recovery?
Yes, it does.
That's actually one of the best features of Citrix Cloud, is that if you're not using Citrix Cloud and you're in a multi-site type scenario, even if you're not in a multi-site scenario, you have to HA all of your components, your BDCs, your SQL servers, your web servers. All those components have to be HA'd, and that, you know, that requires infrastructure and complexity. Citrix Cloud takes that all out of the picture.
All right, great. Are there any other questions? Now, as promised, we do have a Yeti cooler that we will be raffling off. So when we close up the webinar, I will put, oh, Jimmy, do you have a question? Hold on. If you have a question, if you could just post it in the question box, that would be great. Okay, I don't see the question. All right, as I said, we do have a Yeti cooler that we'll be giving away. So I will be emailing the lucky winner of the cooler. So we thank you all for joining our webinar today. And as I said, we will be following up with you and we will answer any other additional questions that you have. Thanks again.